My guide is hooked up to this and he had a bunch of photos. So let me just slightly this thing was showing me. Because you have to,
All right. Yeah, okay, let's get this show on the road. Thank you very much for coming out this evening and attending one of CPA's artist lectures. My name is Renée Byer. I'm the assistant director here. And we have a great evening for you tonight. I want to thank a couple of, is Dave Ferries here from the Monterey Weekly? Not yet? Okay. Dave wrote a great article. You may have seen this. It's hot off the press. I think the ink is still wet. And but it's a fabulous article on our guest speaker, Renée Byer, tonight, and with a two-page spread on the inside. So pick one up, and you can read more about Renée. Okay, my introduction is going to be long because Renée's CV resume is long, and so I had to cut it about in half, and so this will only take about half hour. But I'm going to give a little bit of background. In 1996, American Photo magazine claimed that photojournalism was dead. With readership at an all-time low, the Venerable Life magazine ceased operation in 2000, and since then, many major metropolitan newspapers were forced to reconfigure and realign their marketing efforts, lay off staff, or fold altogether. And Renée and Paul and their friends in the industry back then probably know that all too well. With over 1.2 trillion photographs uploaded in 2017, the internet has opened a wealth of possibilities as photojournalists now have added video and audio to their storytelling toolbox and are now able to communicate to a global audience throughout the world. As many continue to lament the demise of photojournalism, documentarians are actively pursuing cutting projects that can move, inform, and hopefully elicit change. From Jessie Tarbox Beale, who in the late 1800s is considered to be the first published female photojournalist, to names such as Marion Post Walcott, Dorothea Lange, Mary Ellen Mark, and Susan Messias have become prominent names in what was once a paternalistic industry. Tonight's speaker is in great company as one who has forged ahead and through her vision, passion, and commitment has become a prominent figure as a catalyst for change. Renée Byer is an award-winning documentary photojournalist best known for her in-depth work focusing on the disadvantaged and those who otherwise would not be heard. Her ability to produce imagery with profound emotional resonance and sensitivity earned her the coveted Pulitzer Prize for feature photography in 2007 and dozens of national and international honors, including the World Understanding Award for Pictures of the Year International and as a Pulitzer finalist in 2013. Known for her ability to translate stark statistics into images that connect us to our humanity, her stories have deepened our understanding of issues concerning the environment, climate change, extreme poverty, women at war, domestic violence, and the economic crisis in California. Living on $1 a Day, the lives and faces of the world's poor is a powerful and extraordinary series of photographs that profiles and illuminates the people who live in extreme poverty around the world. Traveling to 10 countries on 4 continents, Renée sought out individuals and families on the brink of survival, living on about $1 US each day. Translated into an internationally acclaimed book, Living on $1 a Day won first place documentary book from the International Photography Awards in 2014. Images from the project were exhibited at Visa pour l'Image, the premier global photojournalism festival in Perpignan, France. Were designated as an official exhibition of the month of photography in Los Angeles, featured at the Global Women's Leaders Forum, sponsored by the UNESCO Division of Gender Equality, and also featured on CBS Sunday Morning last year. As a matter of fact, my wife and I were hanging out Sunday morning, and early it comes on at 8 o'clock, and we thought, wow, there's Renée. Okay, and so we saw Renée on Sunday morning. In 2016, Renée was invited to join the UNESCO Who's Who of Women Speakers, and one of the 70 women chosen to mark the 70th anniversary of UNESCO. Her compelling TEDx Tokyo talk The storytelling power of photography received a standing ovation and can be reviewed online. As a senior photojournalist for the Sacramento Bee, Renee's 20-page special project, No Safe Place, chronicled the plight of Afghan SIVs, which means special immigrant visas, as they struggle in the U.S. facing poverty and violence. Her photographs have appeared in publications and exhibitions throughout the world, including Paris Match, National Geographic, Time, and Newsweek, and in numerous solo and group shows, including Look 3, the Festival of the Photograph, Palm Beach Photographic Center, Chiang Mai Festival of Photography, and Photokina, Germany. And Renee just returned from delivering a lecture on Sunday at the Annenberg Space for Photography in Los Angeles. So I could go on and on. This is literally, seriously, this is half of her resume. So we had to cut it down. I left out a lot. And so let's welcome Renée Byer.
Oh, thank you. I don't know where to begin. I'm going to start in the beginning. Well, he basically kind of gave me an introduction to the project, so thank you, Rick, because I did travel to 10 countries and 4 continents to put a human face on the star statistics that 1 in every 6 people live in extreme poverty. But before we go to that, I want to start, just give you a little bit about where I began. So this is one of my favorite photographs that I made, and this is we only have about 4 pictures between my husband and I that actually hangs in our house, and this is one of them. In a scene reminiscent of Alfred Hitchcock's famous Tale of the Birds, hundreds of thousands of starlings and grackles fly over this rural Woodford County field in Illinois. This was in 1982, and I started as a black and white photographer. So I always love to show this picture because I shot this photograph for the Peoria Journal-Star. That was my first job. I was an intern there. And they sent me out to just find a feature. And this is what I came back with. And I remember calling, way back then, we had ham radios, and it was all like, Byer to base. You're not going to believe this, but I just shot 1 million birds. And they were like, what? Huh? Yeah. No, really, I just shot 1 million birds. And so the lesson I learned is basically, if I had hesitated, I would have missed this moment, because literally it was like I barely got out of the car and I was almost afraid because I was really envisioning this Alfred Hitchcock movie. And I just, and that's way back when we didn't have motor drives. We didn't have like a light, we had to do the lighting in our head and all that, the metering. And so I had to really work quick and concise. So this photograph was selected for the Book of Days, edited by Fred Woodward, art director of Rolling Stone magazine. So, and then I got into color photography. But this was actually one of the more recent photographs, another one that I really love. And I just shot this in Ireland this year. And this is my great-grandmother's house. And it was my first trip to Ireland, and and a lot of times when I go on vacation, I actually don't bring my camera because I'm on vacation and I shoot so much. So most of the time I'm with my iPhone, but for some reason I decided, I'm in Ireland, this is my, where my family, began, I should bring my camera. So I did, and I'm so thankful that I did, because this horse came out from behind. I never saw that this horse was there at all. It just mystically appeared, and it was a real magical moment. So I was happy that I had my Nikon instead of my iPhone with me that day. So I just want to give you a little quick, because I always feel like I need to talk a little bit about my Pulitzer Prize winning. So A Mother's Journey is my Pulitzer Prize winning story. And it's basically, I always feel this responsibility back to my subjects to get their images in the right forum to motivate change. For those of you not familiar with this project, the focus is that billions of dollars are given to cancer research, but very little to support families struggling economically and emotionally with childhood cancer. But through the eyes of Cindy French and her son Derek Madsen, we can see that this could have been the most precious gift in the most vital time. So this was a year-long story chronicling single mom and her 11-year-old son, Derek. And it's not an ordinary cancer saga. The photographs often take us places where we don't comfortably go, showing the emotional impact on finances, job loss, and the complex relationship between a mother and her pre-adolescent son. And so this is taken at the museum, and I have a permanent kiosk display there in Washington, D.C., and then interactive where you can actually hear all of behind the scenes about this story. But this is one of the more iconic images. Here, Cindy is racing barefooted after kicking off her flip-flops, pushing her son up and down the hallways of UC Davis, distracting him from his dreaded wait before his scheduled bone marrow extraction. And years later, and this is one of the other photographs up on our wall, I was walking past this photograph, and I realized through the first moment that the light on the pager was going off the exact moment I had made this image for them to be in the operating room. And I was so focused on the expression and the action of the photograph that I never even saw that I had captured that light on the pager until years later. But it was really a story about love and devotion, and here Cindy buys some silly string from the dollar store and is always trying to look her best and keep her son happy. And this is them outside the hospital. And even though they had been playing with the silly string, she picked up every little piece off of the ground afterwards. Wow. It really impressed me. And here's what I felt was the culmination of the series. The family is all fighting about money and funeral costs, and this little boy is days away from dying. So Derek and Cindy have taught us that dying is hard enough, but society should make it easier. And for me, this is the culmination because no family should ever be in a situation like this. And this is an intimate moment of Cindy, just as she had talked to the doctor about bringing in hospice. Cindy was so upset in her room, but Derek didn't know why. He had come in to cheer her up. So as a result of this story, there was an outpouring of support for Cindy, with her helping her with her medical bills, and of course, no mother ever gets over the loss of a child. Many people ask me, how is Cindy? I actually just had lunch with Cindy like a few weeks ago. I want to share with you what she wrote on Facebook this year on the 10th year anniversary. I am very humbled to have been chosen to be his mommy. It is I who is grateful to be able to impact others and give them a few normal moments in the midst of what seemed like total chaos. Thankful for Renée Byer for capturing these special moments for my family and I. No amount of thanks I could ever give to her would be enough. You can imagine how that made me feel when I read that. And I just sort of caught it on Facebook. She didn't even say, hey, Renée, I just wrote about it. So that's 10 years later. So this image has really been all over the world. It's graced magazines everywhere. This is Days Japan's last year, 150th issue. And the slogan was, a single photograph has a power to change the course of a nation. It was featured amongst many iconic images by renowned photographers such as Nick Ott, Eddie Adams, to name a few. And I wasn't expecting to see it life-size on the outside of a building in Korea. Or life-size inside the building. I'd asked a friend, hey, could you just go take some pictures of my pictures on exhibit? And this is what he sent me. I was like, oh my gosh. So now I'm going to focus on my Living on a Dollar a Day series. So as you know, I traveled to 4 countries to humanize this staggering statistic. The United Nations Millennium Goals fell short in 2015 to eradicate extreme poverty. Now there's a new deadline by 2030 and a new set of sustainable goals to meet. So many of these single images are accompanied by photo stories. And this book, which is part of this whole project, was photo edited and designed by the former director of photography, David Griffin of National Geographic. It's won all kinds of awards. And it's become a documentary also, and it had a film crew follow me in the making of the project of the book. And it's now got this audience engagement app so that when you come through the exhibition, you can have a call to action, which I will talk at the end of this. But this is it on exhibit right now at Consumers River College Art Gallery. It's really become a huge exhibition, and it's traveled into Europe, and it's traveled in the United States, and I hope to bring it here at some point. But I went to Ghana, Peru, Cambodia, Romania, Moldova, Bolivia, Liberia, Bangladesh, India, Thailand for this project. But I'm just gonna go over a few of the stories. I really consider myself more of a catalyst for change than, and so I believe in the universal language and power of photography, the art of photography that has the ability, when combined with journalism and the unvarnished reality of life, that can bring people together and effect meaningful change. As you view these photographs, I want you to imagine you are living in a place that lacks the basic necessities of life that we take for granted, such as electricity, food, access to health care, water, clean air, education, shelter or a home, or even a bathroom. Could you live in this reality? And if not, why wouldn't you want to help? So, the first time I had been to Africa, I was doing a story, Seeds of Doubt, for the Sacramento Bee about genetically modified food. And while I was there, I was photographing this little boy who was working alongside his mother to make coal. He was a toddler, he was maybe 2 years old. And I followed him back to the encampment. And as he lifted his hand to have a few grains of rice, the village chief said, "Those that don't work don't eat." This was an unfathomable moment for me. I was thinking in my head, if this toddler had not helped working alongside his mother, he would not have been able to eat. And I could never get this child's expression and his eyes and this moment out of my mind. So when Tom Nazario, the founder of the Forgotten International, was seeking out a photojournalist to work on this book project on extreme poverty, I applied. And that's how I wanted to work on women's rights, child labor, hunger, and extreme poverty issues. And before I forget, I just want to mention one thing, and that is when I'm traveling on assignments, many times we are relying on security, drivers, interpreters to keep us safe. I'll never forget how these Muslims protected me and slept outside my door on the ground to keep me safe, and how they had such a great outlook of the United States and wished to come and visit. So for my trips, I travel very light because I'm always a subject for, having my stuff stolen, etc. So I carry 2 Nikon bodies, teleconverter, 70-200, 24-70, a 20, and I've always shot on manual. I spent months in advance researching and working with the nonprofit to prepare for my trips. My research starts with checking with the State Department, visiting a website about visas, inoculation requirements, travel warnings. I always check in with the U.S. Embassy when I travel. I always call a network of friends that photograph internationally as I resource for logistical info. And I bring a lot of stuff. A headlamp because electricity, if I'm lucky enough to have it, goes out. Tent, mosquito net, sleeping bag, extra hard drives, batteries, notebooks, my MacBook, extension cords, all these things. Vitamin C with electrolytes I have to bring that. Malarone for malaria, just an assortment of things. And I buy extra travel insurance from World Nomads, and I always wear this ID bracelet that gives all of my medical information and how to get it. But this is the same child that's on the cover of my book. And I started my trip in India. And this is Vishal. He's 6 years old and he's a rag picker. And he's trying to pick rags to exchange and recycle. He goes to school and he hopes to become a policeman so he can arrest the bad guys and put them in prison. That's what he said. He has 7 siblings in his family and they are all boys. His dad is a sweeper and does construction work, and his mom works as a cleaner. And that's him too. But what I love about this picture is it's such a stark contrast to the rag-picking child. In a way, it preserves his dignity, and the dignity of my subjects is paramount. And here he is, where you see all over the world children helping take care of other children. And this is the space that they live in. I try to never pre-visualize my photos because the unexpected happens over and over again. Curiosity of the unknown brought me to this image. I was standing outside this little shelter in this little doorway, and I was wondering, well, I wonder what's inside. And I stepped inside, and there is Vishal right there in the middle, and there are these 3 little boys, and that is their entire living space for the 6 children and the parents, is that one bed, and that is it. That's all there is. Also, while in India, I would find my subjects just by walking the streets, like this image. So I stopped the crew I was with to talk to her, and I photographed this with a slow shutter speed because it's so often people are just walking with blinders on as if people don't exist. And I looked at this child, and she's in a wheelchair, and I wanted to know, what is her story? A sea of people passing her by, and she has been blind for the past 10 years. And she lives close to this mosque in India. She begs as the only source of income for her family that consists of her brother, who has fluids on his brain, and her mother up in the corner there, who is suffers from asthma, has a womb ailment, and prevents her from manual labor. Their father died 10 years ago of tuberculosis. So I did a little story, spend a week with them. Here she is on the streets begging for food. So what she does is she goes out in the morning to beg for enough for all of them to eat breakfast, and then she goes out in the evening and begs enough for all of them to eat dinner. And that's basically all that they have. And they live near this mosque where the mother is very meticulous about keeping the area clean after they eat. And as with most mothers, her mom wants her to look her very best every day. Her hopes and dreams for her children are the same as ours. She wishes they could attend school and not work. So after spending some time with them in the streets, I had no idea where they had slept or lived, so I asked if I could follow them home. This is one of those unexpected moments I'm talking about when I never pre-visualized they would be sleeping on the street and had no shelter at all. And here their mother is in intense heat. I think it was at least 112 degrees, and she's fanning them to keep them cool at night. And here they are, although they have no home, no toys, no bathroom, no running water, all the things we take for granted, they have decided to clap and sing a song for me, showing me joy among their deprivation. So since the videographer that is filmed the documentary, he's helped this family. And now this family lives in an apartment, and the mother sells clothing on the streets, and the children are in school. For very little, actually. It's only about, let's see, Angela's been sending $100 a month for the last 5 years. So that's about how much it was. So for $100 a month, this family can actually live in an apartment, send their children to school. And this is in northern India, where over 600 families live in a tent slum. They have no bathroom, running water. They use these tarp-like structures for shelter, and many use their children to beg on the streets as their only source of income. Also true among the poor is that children take care of other children, like here. 2 siblings, Rudra and Suhani, 3, who are searching for some tea to drink. I love the protective brother's little foot on his hand on his little sister's shoulder. In slum communities, 98% of the children are malnourished, anemic, and underweight. And they've both lost 2 other siblings to malnutrition. But in this community, Buddhist monks from the Thailand Charitable Trust are trying to break the cycle of poverty. They are removing the children to teach with them in a tent school and feed them every day. When you are hungry, it's hard to learn. These are small nonprofits that are crucial They are the people who work in these small grassroots programs that are the true heroes every day. And here they are, they're just getting rice and beans to eat, but they're actually starting to learn a little bit of English and very basic things, but they're not being used to beg with on the streets. And then, and that's another picture, same. So this is a great example of a great truth project that can bring release to the slum children. At this slum, same one, this gives a clean start to the day. This is a solar-powered shower, and I can't remember, but I mean, we're talking a few $100s, and now they can all have a bath, bathe themselves every day. The solar-powered shower was a gift from the same charitable trust, and it's afforded them to be, first of all, to be cool in this debilitating heat, but also to be clean. The problem is they can't give them new clothes to put on, because if they do, the parents will sell it in the market, so they sort of have to put on the dirty clothes after they shower. But in the slum settlement, the mother of this child, who is 20 years old, starves her daughter, Sangrita, 2 years old, while her sister, 5 months old, sleeps in comfort above right in her mother's arms. She only weighs 9 pounds. Children are more likely to appeal to the sympathy of those inclined to give to beggars, so those who beg use children for this purpose. Worse, sometimes, as in cases like this, the child is starved and carried about by the children's parents, but also is rented out to another beggar to be used as an object of sympathy in the hope of generating more income over the course of a given day. Sometimes these extra funds are used to feed other children. Thus, in practice, one child is sacrificed for the sake of the others. So this was one of the more harrowing moments that I had, this was my first country that I was photographing, and I was so afraid people would look at this picture and then they would just dismiss it because it was just so harrowing. They couldn't see their child in this child's eyes. But when I photographed this child was immediately helped. This is the mother, and these are that's her other child, and that's still the same little baby right there. But she was taken away and nursed back to health by a mobile medical clinic by the Buddhist monks who were overseeing the slum. And as a result of me just physically being there and taking this photograph. And now, I recently got an upgraded photograph of her. This was a few years ago. She is doing well and posing in her school uniform. But 18,000 children under the age of 5 die a day from preventable causes. I think one is too many. And part of the story, we went to Bolivia and photographed on climate change. The sun goes down in the urban sprawl of El Alto, one of the poorest cities in Latin America, located just outside Bolivia's capital, in La Paz. It is home to some 1 million people who live in more than their fair share of slums, as well as an oppressively high altitude, 13,600 feet above sea level. Also unique to this city is that due to climate change, glaciers have dried up and snowpacks are disappearing, leaving the city with very little water. It is a city in distress. So just to give you an example of how much time I spent on this project, I spent hours, almost a full day on this one spot. I kept going back to it because I kept wanting to get some sense of humanity in the picture and not just get a photograph. If you look far to the right there, you'll see a little teacup up in the corner in the window there. And I kept coming back thinking, maybe I can find somebody that's going to have their little cup of something right there, and I can get a person in the picture. And now, don't forget, I've got a whole team with me, and they're all not wanting to miss their lunch, miss their dinner. And I've got to bring food with me to keep them happy, and water. And we're all just sitting on this ledge waiting for a moment to happen. to give this photograph some scale and to have a human element. And so you see the little girl and the dog right there, and that's where I was like, okay, we've got a photograph. We can go home now.
Aren't they at that high altitude because they're looking for little bits of gold in the quartz up there?
They might be. It's not something that I studied or researched, but that could possibly be. I don't know. So, of course, when you're up at that high an altitude, you know, it's very hard to breathe, and you're working in slow motion. I don't know how many of you have ever been to Bolivia, or, you know, maybe you can raise your hand, but you're like, you know, when you first get there, you're like, you know, and when you're used to running to get in front of things, it's a challenge. So, so this is following the death of his father, Alvaro, 9 years old, helps his family survive by herding. He opens the gate to the stone pen that holds the family's alpacas and llamas each morning so they can gaze throughout the hillside during the day. Then he heads off to school, but must round them up again in the evening. They lived in a home with no insulation, no electricity, no bed, and their water comes from the streams that run off the snow-covered mountains. Their livelihood lies with their animals, for each animal produces about 3 pounds of fur each year, and each pound of fur is sold for 18 bolivias, which amounts to about $2.50 US. All in all, this family may earn about $200 of income each year from the herd which they are. And now we are in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and this is a little boy that runs along the polluted waterways of his home. This area also doubles as his playground. More than 1 billion of the world's poor lack adequate access to clean drinking water, and an estimated 400 million of these are children. Illness from unclean water causes children to miss roughly 443 million school days every year. But the point is that this could be anyone's child. Can you imagine him with the same expression? I mean, he's running, he's smiling. I think that invites you into the picture because you're wondering, well, how can a child who has nothing, who's living in this horrible, I mean, you can't breathe what I'm breathing, but the smell is pretty rank. And this is all he knows. And this is also, so when I found this picture, I was just walking past all these little shacks that were in Cambodia, and I could see through the doorway the scene inside. And so then I have to work through my interpreter to say, I want to know what the story is inside there. I see this beautiful light and this picture, and so I have to work with them to try to get the access to get in there and then spend the time in there to get the photograph. So this landmine victim had lost his leg when he stepped on a landmine in 1980 near the Cambodian tidewater. He is a widower and is the sole head of his family, caring for 11 children in a home he does not own. It has been scheduled for demolition since being purchased by a private developer in 2008. And one of the biggest livelihoods of the poor is agriculture, fishing, and recycling. In Cambodia, a child washes in the polluted river that she also helps her family fish in, on the only home they have, a tiny boat. Children are needed to help their parents work so they do not go to school. So the boat literally is their only possession. It's not like they use that for their vocation and then they go home to a home. That's their home. And this cycle just goes round and round for our families. They never really get out of the same cycle. The children just go on and repeat the parents' cycle of living. And the fishing nets are one of their #1 commodities, because if the fishing net is broken or torn, that's how they basically catch their fish. And this is in Bangkok, Thailand. This is 18-year-old boy. He's one of a group of homeless children sleeping on the streets of Bangkok, many of whom are addicted to sniffing glue in order to suppress their appetite and in some way psychologically escape their circumstances. They survive on the streets by nearly any means necessary, but are more often victimized by others. And none of my pictures are pose, or are they traditional portraits. They're all moments. So I was walking, this is in a brothel in Bangladesh, and I was just walking through the brothel, and just this moment of this woman standing in the doorway, actually mom, her name is Laban, she says she's 27, takes a moment to hold her young daughter, Napur 1, who was fathered by a client, before she has to return to her evening's work in a brothel in Jessore, Bangladesh. Most children born into the sex trade follow the same cycle of abuse as their mothers. With more than half its population living below the poverty line, Bangladesh remains one of the poorest countries in the world. As in other countries, poverty, low social status, and lack of opportunities for education and employment have forced women to become sex workers. Many girls are sold by their families as sex workers for very little money. And this little girl, I think she might have been 14 or 15. She said she was older because they all have to say they are. I think she said her age was 20, but I knew she was younger. And she has this, I've never seen this yellow in the eyes, but that yellow is from hepatitis. She had been working at the brothel in Bangladesh for the past 3 years. She said she was very sick and she was waiting for a customer to arrive. So she's carrying the hepatitis B virus. And when I'm always shooting, I'm always trying to see what's in the foreground, what's in the background. All those things are very important to me. But this was at the garment district in India. And I was trying to get access, and I think I was there several days. Finally, I got the access into this one, and they wanted me to shoot specific people, and then I sort of talked them into some other people. And this little girl to the right, her expression never changed. She's 14 years old, and she lives in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and she works 12-hour days doing the same thing repetitively over and over and over. She makes zippers for clothing that will be sold around the world. Her mother is a laborer and works at a construction site. Her father left years ago, and she went to school until the 5th grade and is now needed to support her brother, who's 8, and her sister, who's 11. And they lived in this one-room structure with no bathroom and no electricity. And I was a little frustrated because I kept thinking, well, she's got no expression, she's got no expression. And the interpreter said, maybe that's the photograph. And he was really right, it was a photograph. And our travels took us to Romania and Moldova in Eastern Europe. And this is 4-year-old Anna Maria Tudor, standing in the light of her doorway in Bucharest, Romania, hoping for a miracle as her family faces eviction from the only home they have ever had. Her father recently had a gallbladder surgery that resulted in an infection and left him unable to work. The one room they were living in, again, no bathroom, no running water. This one frame, though, I was photographing the family to the left, and they were in another doorway, and I was photographing them, and I kind of saw her out of the corner of my eye, and I thought, oh my gosh, I hope she doesn't move, because it was just so beautiful the way the light was coming in. And I slowly moved the camera and hoped she wouldn't, and all the weight of her family's troubles seemed to be on her shoulders as she faced the light. So since this photo was taken also, Samuel Social, a nonprofit in Romania, who I was traveling with as the social worker for this part of the book, has helped this family. And this little girl is now in school, and they're living in a better place. And this is in Romania. The Roma live in a state of statelessness, for they are nomadic and can't get government help. Many live on borrowed land. And this was, her name was Viorica, and she's 31. She's taking a break from cooking soup for her family. She had spent most of the day just rummaging through garbage to get things. They owned a few pigs to feed the pigs. Their house, again, nothing, no water, no bathroom, no electricity, and they had no title deeds, so they were in fear of being evicted. And this is called Romania's Lost Generation. It's in Bucharest, Romania. And this is some of the city's poor climb down into the underground heating vents or sewers where they lived and eat by candlelight because there is no they use the candlelight for electricity. So this is Hora Florin, 28, a victim of Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu's orphanages and one of Romania's lost generation of children that lives underground, where the heating vents keep him warm at night. And so I came down this really thin, it was like a hole in the ground, and I went down this ladder, and I had absolutely no idea what was going to be down there when I went down there. What I really love about this picture is this elegant teapot in the background. It's like, wow, it's just such a scene. And I have to say, it was one of the moments where I thought, if I climb down this ladder, am I ever going to be able to climb back up? But I'm so thankful that I did. So it's one of my favorite images. And this is Moldova's rural poor. This is Anastasia. She's 4 years old. She hugs her favorite pet as her brother, 15, attends to chores in their house. She accompanies her mother in the fields to work for money and food. There's not enough money to send her to kindergarten in this rural village. But I just love this picture with the cat and the little dirty hands in the face. It's just so precious. And this is in Peru. A victim of domestic violence, Erica, forms a train-like procession as she walks with 3 of her children, as well as her grandchild, fastened to her back through the streets of Lima, collecting recyclables. In Lima, 20% of all of its waste is gathered up in this manner. Her children are needed to help her and do not attend school. The family lives in a room, again, with no water, no electricity, and on the verge of eviction. And I walked miles and miles and miles with this family. I couldn't believe they got up so early in the morning. This is the little boy. He's taking a break from gathering up some recyclables. And then this is at day's end. They turn in the items they collected to a local recycling center and hope that they've raised enough money to pay their next day's rent. So, in all of my images, I don't use flash. I use all available light. I always kind of want to just be there to just capture the moment as it is. And I try to use as little camera gear as I can. So, and some call me the human tripod. Actually, this looks a little lighter on the screen than on mine. It's a little bit darker, but I think I made this at 1/8 of a second. On a hillside overlooking the city of Culiacan, Peru, sit 3 boys who await their mother's return home. Their mother, a victim of domestic violence, sings on the streets and in buses to try to make a living and provide for them. Yet not even the 10 by 10 foot home they live in is theirs. It is a home with no bathroom, 1 broken bed, and nothing but an open fire over which to cook. It is a makeshift shelter constructed illegally on the hillside from which the local authorities are trying to evict them. But I also love the little blurred motion on the little boy in the center, his legs. You can see that he's kind of impatiently waiting for his mother to return home to cook dinner for them. And I want to introduce you to Miguel. Miguel exemplifies the good that one man can do in Peru. This orphanage that he started began when he lost his son in the late 1980s. It started as a small mission as Miguel was going to the streets of Lima bringing food and medicine to street children. Shortly thereafter, he began taking in street children and finally moved them himself and his family to a squatter settlement where they could build a larger shelter to house children. And so what happened was he lost his son when he was very young. I think he was less than a year old. And he was walking the streets and he saw 2 little orphan boys and he thought to himself, why didn't you take them? Why did you take my son? And then he felt horrible. And that's when he started walking the streets and taking children home with him. And now he has an orphanage with 830 children, from 1 month old to 17 years old. And it's the largest orphanage in the world. And he always takes a moment to greet every child. And it's just amazing. I mean, they play sports. Here they come running up to see what the meal of the day is going to be. They are loved by the founder. Here he's shushing them so that they can all say thanks before they eat. And it's, even though it's, these are all impoverished children, they're all healthy and smiling and happy. And it's one of the happiest orphanages I've ever visited. With so many children and so much to do every day, the orphanage is long. Nevertheless, by day's end, although exhausted, Miguel is always filled with joy, for few jobs are more rewarding than giving so many children a chance at a better life. And I love the smile on his face, and the dirty stuffed animals behind him, and the fact that he has a sense of purpose. When I first approached these women, they didn't want me to photograph them. But I think because they saw me saddled down with camera gear and hard working, that they finally relented and allowed me to do it. So I think that being a woman was very helpful in this circumstance. This is in Bolivia, and they're potato farmers, and they're actually just working for the potatoes, not for any money. In the background is the mountain known as Sleeping Dragon, if you've ever gone there. And then then they broke out into this dance after harvesting the potatoes. And I was just like, wow. First they didn't want me to take any pictures at all, and they were like really mean to me. And now look at them. I was like thinking, what the heck? But it's one of the more beautiful pictures. And this photograph exhibited outside UNESCO World Headquarters in Paris last year and went on to Rome. And as part of this exhibition, What Does Peace Look Like? And it's like that size. It's a little bigger than that. It's like really huge. It's life size. And we traveled to 2 countries in Africa, Liberia and Ghana. And this is Justina with her daughter, Sata 5. Crippled since the age of 3, she depends on her arms to lift and drag herself. She survives by doing laundry for others, selling cookies on the street, and begging in Monrovia, Liberia. Both of them suffer from malaria, and she wishes for a wheelchair, a private room to live in, and for her daughter to go to school. They sleep in a hallway of a home that has no electric toilet or running water, and they own nothing. But they're really hardworking. So I guess the point I want to make is that the myth that the rural poor are lazy is nothing, it's just not true. Everywhere I went, everyone was working really, really, really hard. And the extreme poor throughout the world, all they want to do is work and make their own living. They don't want handouts, they just want to work. And this is another really sad story that I covered in Liberia as well. This was an orphanage, just very big contrast to the one in Peru, unfortunately. This poor girl, she was 15 years old, and she was suffering from fistula that makes you unable to control your urine. So she had been raped, and she had been isolated from others in the orphanage and had been forced to sleep on only the metal springs. And this is a big problem in some of these countries with fistula. And I did a whole section of the book on it, and there's lots of other pictures to bring awareness. But this goal would be to achieve health care and well-being for all. And so this is a little photo story I did on these little cowboys, and they were like 5, 6, and 7 years old, and in the Volta region of northern Ghana. The children care for 40 cows every day, and they band together, and I followed them into the African bush as they did this for a full day. This is a huge responsibility for boys of this age. If any of these cattle are lost, the family would have to make up the costs. And in this part of Africa, one cattle is how wealth is measured, so the cows themselves are quite valuable. So can you imagine your little boys 5 and 6 carrying these big machete instruments, and we're having no food to eat. They've got to cut fruit off of trees, and they have no water but the water that's running in the streams, and they're just expendable. The children are used for the workforce, and they're expendable, so if they die, they just throw another kid out there. And this is, you can see them running through the tall grasses, minding these cows. And so it started to lightly rain, and they were taking shelter. As they were taking shelter, they also lived in fear of snakes. And when I went back and I interviewed the father, and there's pictures of the father and all kinds of other pictures of this story in the book, the father had been blinded by a snake bite, and their brother had died from a snake bite. And they said that they've beaten 3 snakes to death in the past year. The boys wished they could all go to school instead of working every day herding these. But I was thankful because I had no idea that these snakes, and I was running in the jungle, but I was wearing boots, and they weren't, as you saw, they were running barefoot. And this is another, it's a photograph in Ghana. In order to survive, these are called Kayayo girls. They live in communal settings that require the least amount of rent. They often come from the north to the city searching for a better life. And they're porters. They just carry heavy loads on their heads at market from early morning to evening. And here they are working together. And one of them said, everyone is struggling, so we can't help each other. These girls, like I said, get victimized and are pregnant. Most of them wind up pregnant with no money to return back to the north. But again, you see all the layers, and I was sitting in the corner for about 2 hours waiting for something to come into the middle of that frame. Because I could see all these little pieces, like each picture was its own picture. And this is an electronic dump site in Accra, Ghana. So, yeah, what used to be the pristine water of the Kori Lagoon in the city of Accra, Ghana, is now an electronic dump site that is so toxic neither fish nor worms can survive. The children that work on this e-waste dump site burn computers in order to extract any valuable metals that might fall to the ground. In the process, they expose themselves to toxic fumes that gather in their clothes, skin, and lungs. There are no environmental regulations, and without protective clothing, these children are exposed to chemical fumes daily, risking their lives to live and work in the dump site. Many live in small shacks, lacking running water and electricity, and the lagoon serves as their only source of water for bathing and washing clothing, despite the extreme levels of pollution. In our quest for technical advancement, continuously moving on to the latest electronic update, we must consider what we waste. Here are the remains from the cast-off computers of the Western world. I'm wearing boots on, protective clothing. And it's just a little clip of me working inside there. But Fatty, 8 years old, has the tears streaming down the face from the effects of malaria as she scavenges with her bare hands to collect a few tiny metals to exchange for some money. So we'll go back to Fatty a little later, but when I saw this photograph, I'd seen a lot of pictures of e-waste, but I'd never seen the actual effects on the children. I'd seen some children working there, but I didn't see this emotional connection. When I went to photograph her, I was almost afraid to lift my camera because I really wanted to get that emotional picture. And Philemon, his hands are blackened with carbon residue and soot. His eyelashes are singed from the flames. He's 14 years old and uses his hands to sift through the burned over soil to find bits of precious metals. Most nights he sleeps on the street, and when it rains, he sleeps under someone's truck. So when I went back to the hotel that night, I took off my shoes, I took off my socks, and my feet were black. And that's when I realized what kind of damage could this be doing to these children and their lungs. The remnants of old keyboards are embedded on the pathway. And Aisha 10 has experienced the same fate. The impoverished children that few seem to care about and have been left here without many options in life. There's no environmental codes, regulations, and no one is wearing a mask or protective clothing like I was in the video clip. So most of this is burned, and then, that smoke is just really toxic. You can see one of the boys working. He might be able to get 8 Ghana CD, which is like $2, I think. Another scene. So they all band together, and you can see there's those little shacks. So a lot of them all live and band and sleep in those little shacks in the background. And this is the money shot. Sadly, this won't yield much money, pennies on the dollar. But they found something. So when we throw away our computers, our electronics, we don't think about that place called away. But this place called away exists, and children are suffering there. So as a result of the images I made that were published in the book and the traveling exhibition, someone was compelled to help Fatima and Aisha and 3 other children. They are now all attending boarding school. I traveled back to Ghana to check in on them. I want to share a few images. So that's Aisha, and that's Fatima on the right. That's the one that had the tears streaming down her face. And the above photo was taken seconds after Fatty recognized me and came running up to me. Can you imagine the joy that I felt to see that smile and to know that if not for that photograph, she wouldn't have been there? Later, the founder of the Forgotten International and Jennifer had left Ghana, and and Fatty gave me and also wait, I'm sorry. So Jennifer had traveled with me from the Forgotten International. Tom Nazario is the author of this book, and so Jennifer and I both went back to check on Fatty because it was through the Forgotten International that Fatty got helped. So I just wanted to make that clear. And then, so after I'd gotten back, Tom had written me back, "Thank you for going all the way to the other side of the world to see her. A large part of what's happened to her life she owes to you." But she also insisted on giving me a hairstyle that day. So you can see what her potential, maybe she could be a hairdresser here in the United States. There's just so much. You see this poor little child, she would have had nothing, no life at all. So here she is in school. Very assertive, and I hear she's doing very well, actually. Learning French and English. She's not even having to beg for her food anymore. She's done well with her schoolwork. Here she is talking to her mother on a cell phone. And then now she has mosquito nets, so they can sleep at night. So as a result of the book, I was able to start a nonprofit, Positive Change Can Happen, that has helped me build a traveling exhibition for living on $1 a day to educate about extreme poverty issues. Once I read the comments and witnessed the people's interest in extreme poverty, I decided to develop an audience engagement app so that people could react in real time as they go through the exhibition. Those are 2 different exhibitions. An interactive photographic exhibition that inspires people to create change with compassion, education, and action. At first, I was concerned about getting this book and exhibition out before the United Nations Millennium Goals in 2015. because it published in 2014. I felt a lot of pressure, but now I'm focusing on 2030, when the new United Nations Sustainable Goals are up for review. And I was invited by Irina Bokova, the former Director General of UNESCO, as a keynote speaker to present the Education Lab in Sofia, Bulgaria, at the Global Women Leaders Forum. There I expressed how staggering statistics are important, but suggested that documentary photojournalism can humanize extreme poverty in a more personal way, and when combined with the Audience Engagement app, can educate specific goals and issues that you can enact by simply sharing on social media, donating, or pledging to help in some way. So the app is focused on 10 goals. This is just an example of some of them, and they're attached to each picture. So when you go through, there's a barcode now, and you can see how it works. So you can scroll through, you can listen in my voice, me talk about some of the pictures, you can share on social media, you can go to the goals, you can read more. So it's very educational for children, for college students, for anyone. So you can share, donate, pledge. Here it is being used in Western Kentucky University. And I just want to leave you with this quote from the Dalai Lama, who wrote the foreword for my book: "Unfairness in the human condition can only be remedied when people everywhere care."